Shalom, and welcome to part 3 of our scroll-to-scroll Bereshit Parsha. We closed our part 2 with our Torah question of the week, which was, the Nephilim are also called men of renown. What are they famous for? It's literally men of name. Well, no one really knows, but here's my best guess. I think the Nephilim created civilization that may have existed up until that time. I think that they may have created pre-Adamic civilizations, like the land of Havilah, which seems to have already been established as it's being quoted with respect to the time that Adam and Eve are in, or just Adam at that point, is in the Garden of Eden. I am, however, open to other suggestions, as always. Okay, so let's get to our Haftorah reading. Isaiah 42, verse 5 through 43:10, which begins in Hebrew, Ko amar ha'el Yahweh, bore hashmayim, venotechem rocha ha'eretz, vetse etza'echa, noten neshama, la'am alecha, v'ruach laholechem ba. Ani Yahweh karaticha ve'tzerech, ve'achsek, ve'yadacha, ve'etzorcha, ve'etencha, Livrit am leor goyim, livchoach atnayim, ivarot, lechotzi, mimasker asir mibet kele yoshve choshech. Which is to say, Kirma ha'el, thus says Elohim, Yahweh, who created the heavens and stretched them out. Right? So, and who spread out the earth and what it brings forth, who gave breath to the people upon it and life to those who walk thereon. 42 verse 5, Borei hashmayim venotechem rocha ha'eretz, made the heaven stretched out and who spread out the earth. Rakia and Natah both mean to incline, to stretch out, in the sense of sculpting creation. In a bad sense, it can mean perversion, when something that is perfect is stretched out or bent morally or physically. 42 verse 6. Ani Yahweh, I Yahweh, in my grace have summoned you. Right? And I have grasped you by the hand, and I created you. Leberit im, covenant people. La'or goyim, a light to the Gentiles. Right? And so, fashion you covenant people for the light to the nations. Covenant, berit, is in creation, Bereshit. The light, or in the Aramaic, is in the Aramaic word for the Torah. 1 second, just making. I always like to, if I see a little issue on the notes, I catch it, I mark it, but you'll never see it. Okay, these concepts are all connected at the most basic level, I believe. As we read 42 verse 7, opening eyes, right? The pega einim, deprived of light. Now that's interesting because, you know, oriot, blind, is basically spelled ayin wa resh, whereas light is aleph wa resh. And the mystical lessons, and a lot of mystics, is that when an ayin is swapped in a word for in place of an aleph, it means something bad. So if aleph wa resh means light, ayin wa resh is blindness. A bad substitution, in other words, right? Rescuing prisoners from confinement, from the dungeon, to those who sit in the darkness. Ani Yahweh, Huwa Shemi, I am Yahweh, that is my name. Oh, I love this. Ukavodi le'echer lo Eten. I will not give my glory to another, or my renown to idols. The Pesalim. I absolutely adore this. And I am Yahweh, will not give my name to another, my praise to carved images. One of the clearest statements in all Tanakh that we are not to substitute his name. I will not give my name to those. Right? We do not call on him by names he did not officially sanction. You can say that he sanctioned Elohim and Adonai in Hebrew. You can make that claim. But you cannot say that whatever the English equivalents are, that he sanctioned those. Right? And it is interesting that the same rabbis who perpetuated the ban on his name marry this Haftorah with Bereshit, since 4 verse 26 of Bereshit says, at that time men began to call on the name of Yahweh. So, reading verse 9, see, the things predicted have come, and now I foretell things I announce to you them before they sprout out. Right? The previous things that come to pass, I'm declaring new Chadash things, and I'm telling you of them. Harishonot haneva'u, v'chadashot ani magid beterem titzmacha ashmi'a etchem. Right? Now, this is a beautiful line, right? He tells us of these things before they spring forth. This is a key about how to determine the new moon, right? The same word, Hodesh, is the same word. And here, as we see here, the new things are declared before they spring forth. If they've sprung forth, they are not Hadash, therefore not Hodesh. See how that works? Right? The waxing crescent of the new moon has already sprung forth up to 3 days before you see it. That can't be new. That's a used month. That month is 10% discounted. It's 10% over. And then with 42 verse 11, Sharula Yahweh, Shir Chadash, sing to Yahweh a new song. Again, following the same theme as above. The new song has never gone forth. It's not been sung before. And this is where we get to our classic Torah thought for the week, which I have as a bonus feature. Because Bereshit is a parsha that begs for bonuses. And we've got a few of them, as I've already alluded to. I think the total is 4 or 5. The Adventures of Rabbi Adam. Throughout this past year, we've seen on many occasions both lofty insights, seismic pitfalls of what we call the oral law of the rabbis. And very often the claim is made that when the written Torah was given on Mount Sinai to Moshe, a secret oral Torah was passed on to the elders, who would eventually become the Great Assembly, then the Sanhedrin, and finally Pharisees, and then Orthodox Judaism that sprang out of the Pharisees. These are the actual words of the sayings of the fathers, or Pirkei Avot. Moses received the law on Sinai and delivered it to Joshua. Joshua, in turn, handed it down to the elders. From the elders it descended to the prophets, and each of them delivered it to its successors until it reached the men of the Great Assembly. The last name originated 3 maxims. Be not hasty in judgment, bring up many disciples, and erect, I love this, I make fun of this, the safeguards for the law. This word sayag, for fence, right? You know, they make it sound like, as I said in the Name of the Father Deluxe teaching, right, and in the video, I was like, what is this safeguards? It sounds like a product improvement. Now, with brand new safeguards in place, except fences are bad. Always bad. And that's what we're going to get to in the Adventures of Rabbi Adam. Right? Now, even though the Talmud itself continuously admits that the rabbis are debating one another and in effect making new rulings throughout the Middle Ages and even into the Renaissance, they still hold to the idea that the core of their rulings come from this original oral law. And to be sure, there was a core of that oral law that was around in the time of Yeshua as well, which is why Yeshua himself commented on an earlier form of the oral law. As we read in Matthew 15, starting in verse 1. Then the scribes and the Pharisees who were from Jerusalem drew near to Yeshua and said, why do your disciples transgress not the Torah, the traditions of the elders? Right? and do not wash their hands when they eat bread. Then Yeshua answered and said to them, why do you transgress against the commandments of Elohim? Because of your traditions. For Elohim said, honor your father and mother. Hey, it's one of the top 10 commandments here. And anyone who reviles his father and mother, let him be put to death. That's, I believe, in Deuteronomy. And everyone will say, amen, right? But you say, anyone who says to a father or mother, my offering is whatever you have gained by me, then he does not need to honor his father and mother, and so you nullify the word of Elohim because of your tradition. Now though, I want to throw in my surprise. While I cannot possibly sanction the rabbinic oral law going all the way back to Moshe, I can, in this instance, maybe support a core of oral law going back all the way to Adam. But I'm such a vocal opponent of the oral law. Why in the world would I do this? Because as we're about to see, having a core go back to Adam is not necessarily a good thing, and not necessarily a validation for the process of the rabbis or the tradition that has survived as oral law. Because first, Adam gets a job to do that would be the envy of any rabbi. You read in Genesis 2:19-20. So from the soil Yahweh Elohim fashioned all the wild animals and all the birds of heaven. And these he brought to man to see what he would call them. Each one was to bear the name man would give it. The man would give it. The man gave names to all the cattle, all the birds of heaven, and all the wild animals. So this concept of naming the essence of things goes back to the very beginnings of our race. As believers, it is a core tenet of our faith to assert that monotheism, which is to say Abba Yahweh walking in the garden, right, was the original faith, and paganism came later, only to have monotheism return with greater force later. And so, in the early forms of pagan corrupted belief, Adam naming all the creatures gets perverted into a story of a god hero that's named Bel or Marduk, and he is said to have combated the evil serpent Tiamat. Now that might be where we get the Hebrew term Tanin in Genesis 1:25. Now how does Bel or Marduk kill the beast? He does it with 100 sacred words or names that cast a magic spell over the beast, serpent. From its carcass, the earth was said to be made. However, this idea surprisingly also survived into the rabbinic period. The founder of a sect called the Hasidim, a form of orthodoxy that's akin to what Pentecostalism is in Christianity, they took the title Baal Shem Tov, right? That's what the founder calls himself. And that translates to Master of the Good Name in English, right? So here again, the rabbis love to name things, and then they love to classify and codify that which they've already named. And when you are a master of good names, you are a great rabbi, as the founder of the Hasidim was. And this at last brings us back to Rabbi Adam. Abba Yahweh gave Adam only basically 2 commandments at the most to worry about. First, be fruitful and multiply. No problem. But the second command created the first rabbinic fence, or oral law, within the Torah. Then Yahweh Elohim gave the man this command: you are free to eat all the trees of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you are not to eat. For the day you eat of that, you are doomed to die. In other words, that tree of knowledge is not kosher. Don't eat from it. Very simple, right? Straightforward. Clear as day. No fruit from that tree. I've got plenty of other fruit that you're going to love. It's right over here. Just don't even go near that thing. Wait, I just made a fence. I just made a rabbinic fence that could have got me into trouble. And so did Adam and Eve. Let me show you. If Adam just teaches that precept, no more and no less, to Eve, and if Eve retains just that precept, all will be well with them. And not just them, with us. No fall from the garden from grace from the Garden of Eden. Pretty big, right? But unfortunately, as we all know, that did not happen. And the question is, why? It's tempting to blame the serpent. He was, after all, the craftiest of all the animals. It was his plan. It was his revenge plot. He knew how to flatter, persuade, and cajole. But at the end of the day, if the original instructions, and only the original instructions, had simply been followed, if nothing else was added to or taken away from that instruction, the serpent, crafty as he is, would not have been able to deceive anyone. He can lie and pontificate all day long, and it won't matter one bit. So that's why I say that the culprit of all our problems, the way sin entered into the world, was nothing less than the first bit of oral law in history. Adam has 2 commandments to keep and teach, and 1 Talmud, 1 student to teach in the form of Eve. And yet Adam just couldn't help building the first rabbinic fence, which he may have passed down to Eve, or Eve couldn't resist building it. Because this is what Eve says. The woman answered the snake and said, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, Elohim said, you must not eat it or touch it under pain of death." Now let's wait a minute here. When did Abba Yahweh say not to touch the tree or its fruit? Not once. He said don't eat the fruit. Not a word about not touching it. But some might argue, so what? It's a sensible precaution, Andrew. If I don't touch the fruit, I can't be accused of eating it. Well, here's why we should never go beyond what Abba Yahweh has told us. He is smarter than all of us. Because all the serpent had to do was challenge the oral law, not the written law. Then the snake said to the woman, "No, you will not die. For Elohim knows, in fact, that the day you eat it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like gods, knowing good from evil." Yeah, that's true. They will know good from evil. The woman saw that the tree was good to eat, pleasing to the eye, and that it was enticing for the wisdom that it could give. So she took some of its fruit and she ate it. She gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. So Eve takes the fruit. She touches it, right? Violating her own oral law. She then smells it. She doesn't die. She doesn't even get sick. She doesn't even have a pain. Nothing bad happens. Why? Because Abba Yahweh never said anything bad would happen from handling the fruit. As I've said in some other teachings, you can use that fruit as a soccer ball all day long. It's not going to hurt you. Right? But for Eve, it did. Because what she did. This was evidence that it must be okay to eat the fruit because she couldn't tell where her oral law ended and the written law began. And so since the fruit was harmless when she touched it, it must be okay to eat it. Right? Following rabbinic process, that makes perfect sense. Right? And so that allowed death for the entire human race to enter, and that made our Savior, Messiah Yeshua, have to atone for that on the torture stake. All thanks to that oral law. So from there, the serpent puts on his little teacher hat, and he gives a little midrash. So if Adam and Eve are the first rabbis, the serpent is the second rabbi. Gives a midrash on the commands and says several statements that are absolutely, positively, totally true. But arranges them in a fashion as to tell an overall lie and make that lie seem also true. It is true, for example, as the serpent says, Abba Yahweh knows good and evil. It is also true that the day they eat the tree of knowledge, they will be like Abba Yahweh in that aspect, also knowing good and evil. And it is also true that Abba Yahweh, as the one true Elohim, doesn't die. Those statements are true. But here's the lie. The lie is to tacitly suggest that Abba Yahweh has denied Adam and Eve this fruit because he fears they will become his competition. And then this then leads to an even greater lie that once they have this knowledge and are like Elohim in that one area, they're like him in other areas. And that therefore the fruit will make them immortal. When the opposite is the case, the fruit will kill them. And they would have not tasted death had they not eaten the fruit, right? This is what going beyond the actual written commandment does. This is why it is so dangerous. It brings the penalty of death. And finally, in years past, I sort of opened myself up to trouble by teaching and suggesting that Eve alone was the first rabbi because she's the first one to teach offense, which she does to the serpent. However, I sort of got pushback, and justifiably so, from some very well-meaning and determined ladies who pointed out that the command was given to Adam, and Eve wasn't even there when the command was given. Ladies, you are correct. I stand totally corrected, okay? So, if Eve got the commandment wrong or didn't get that command at all, is it her fault? Wasn't she just being submissive to her husband and following his oral law? Possible. Can we know which is which? I don't think so. You know, and technically speaking, the phrase "your yearning shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you" only comes after. Prior to that, Eve is called her the Etzer Kenegdo, the helper who stands in front, meaning she is eye to eye with Adam, and may not at that point be under him per se. And it is necessarily the fault of the rabbi if a student fails. After being diligently, is it the fault of the rabbi if Adam is the rabbi? Is it his fault if he diligently tried to teach Eve that she just didn't get it? It might be, it might not be. I don't know. So that is why at this set apart time of year, when everything else resets, even the Torah readings back to Genesis 1, we should reset ourselves and rededicate ourselves to the written Torah of Moshe and the testimony of Mashiach, Maran Yeshua, because we should not ever fall under this rebuke that we read in the Gospel of John. And the Father who sent me testifies concerning me. You have never heard his voice, nor have you seen his appearance. And his word does not dwell in you, because you do not believe in him whom he sent. Search the scriptures, because in them you think you have that life that is eternal, and they testify concerning me. And you do not desire to come to me, that you might have that life that is eternal. May we all take then very careful thought at this time, and cling to the word, and who through the word and to whom eternal life comes. And that brings us to our renewed covenant reading, which is going to be Yochanan 1:1 through 18. In the beginning there was the word. So I will get that right now. Almost there. Here we are. Bereshit milta. In the beginning, there was the milta. And the milta was with Elohim. And Elohim was that milta. And right away, I got a footnote. I got a couple of them. The phrase Bereshit milta breaks the most basic rule of Aramaic grammar. By combining a feminine noun, miltha, with two masculine verbs for to be, aitochi and hua. This is unheard of in Aramaic literature, other than right here in this passage and in a similar passage in 1 John 1:1. This shows that Abba Yahweh has male and female images or spirits or attributes, even though Abba Yahweh at least metaphorically, in terms of the pronouns, remains masculine, remains a he. It may also be a midrash, a commentary, on Isaiah 11:1 through 2, which describes the spirit of Abba Yahweh descending on Mashiach, using both masculine and feminine language, in terms of the conjugations of the genders of the spirits. This is not something easily translated, let alone when it occurs within the first 4 words. For more information, see the appendix article, Female Attributes. Miltha also has no direct English equivalent It can mean word, manifestation, instance, substance, among other things. In this context, it may best be left untranslated. That is the opinion of Paul Yonan, who in many ways was my mentor and inspiration in my learning process for Aramaic. I have followed it in that footstep. I also do not translate Miltha. I give you guys the choices and let you make up your own mind. 1 verse 2. This was with Elohim in the beginning, which fulfills Messianic prophecy that Mashiach, the ruler of Israel, will have origins of the very most ancient of times. That's according to Micah 5:2 and Isaiah 48 verse 16. Bear in mind that Micah is referring to the spiritual Israel of Elohim, those of the kingdom of heaven, according to the circumcision of the heart. And continuing, everything existed through his hands, and without him, not even one thing existed of the things which have existed. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. So that's a literal Aramaic reading, through his hands. Very important reading. Indicates the word as a creative force, like a sculptor working under the orders of a king. See Psalm 33:6, Isaiah 44:24, Isaiah 66:1 through 2, and the article in the appendix Aleph Tav for more information. Also, while Abba Yahweh is in sole command of the creation process, all the power comes from him. The hands refers to the word from his mouth, and that word, after creating things, will become flesh as his son. Since this is a form of Yeshua, the him is in small letters. The same is done in John 1:10 through 12. Although in another sense, it is also accurate to say that Yeshua is Yahweh. See Luke 2:11 and 1 Corinthians 12 verse 3. Very deep stuff going on here. And the light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. That phrase, light that shines in the darkness, light in the darkness that shines, is Nora b'chashocha menhar. It's a deliberate mirror reversal of a phrase, menhar norah, menorah, which marks the conception of Yeshua, the light of the world, at Hanukkah, the festival of lights. This puts the birth of Mashiach 9 months from Hanukkah during the fall feast and may point to the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles for Yeshua's birth, but actually the night before. Making a note. Okay. But let me go a little bit into more detail as to how I get menorah from Nora b'chashocha menhar. This happens because we first take that phrase, in darkness, which is b'chashocha, and once we've isolated that phrase, we put it into darkness. We fade it out. It drops out. This leaves behind Nora menhar, which is light from the mountain. That's a reference to Mount Sinai and the burning bush. And when the mountain has thus informed us of this, it's done its job, guess what? We fade that out too. And that leaves Nora main, the reverse of which is menorah. This code is deliberate. You have to be reading the Aramaic literature for a while to catch this cleverness. Yochanan loves doing stuff like this. It's part of his writing style. He likes to throw these nuggets to his followers, I believe, to see if they're really paying attention. Okay, continuing while I put that page out. We'll keep reading for a stretch here. There was a man who was sent from Elohim whose name was Yochanan. This man came for a witness that he might testify concerning the light, that all might believe through his hand. He was not the light, rather that he might bear witness concerning the light. For the light was of truth, that which shines on all who come into the world. He was in the world, and the world existed by his hand, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But to those who did receive him, he gave them the authority that they might be the sons of Elohim. Those who have believed in his name, those who neither by blood nor by the will of the flesh nor by the will of a man, rather were begotten by Elohim. Let's read. Miltha refers to the manifestation of the Ruach HaKodesh within Mashiach. The physical body of Mashiach is not the word of Yahweh, but his words and actions demonstrate the will and word of Yahweh, which upholds observance of Torah. Now, there's a term in here that I've never really liked. Christo-pagans, my publisher put this in here. I'd rather say post-Constantinian Messianics, or post-Constantinian Gentile believers. Like Marcion and Constantine taught that Yeshua's body and spirit manifest a different word that did away with Torah. But the word of Yahweh was substituted. The word of Yahweh was substituted with dispensational and replacement lies called theologies, which are more popular among Christians. We see also this talked about in Isaiah 42:8, Isaiah 48:11, and there's another word that is in John 1:14. And the Miltha became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, the glory of the only begotten, who is from the Father, who is full of grace and truth. Right? Echadiah is a beautiful term used among Eastern, Middle Eastern theologians and poets. It literally means the one, the only one. Right? Let's keep reading. Yochanan witnessed concerning him and cried out and said, "This is he whom I said would come after me, and yet be before me, because he was earlier than me." Actually, we know that the Baptist, according to details in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the immerser was born at 6 months. Or actually, something like that. When Mary gets pregnant, Yochanan is 6 months along. So Yochanan is born before Yeshua, and yet he says Yeshua is before him. Okay? And from his fullness we have all received grace on account of grace. But because the Torah was given through Moshe, but truth and grace through Yeshua the Mashiach. Man has not ever seen Elohim, the only begotten of Elohim, who is in the bosom of his Father, has declared him. So we see a lot of references in the footnotes here. I'm not going to read them all for those last couple of lines, but I did want to focus on what this other footnote says. The Torah of Moshe is the word of Yahweh, but grace and truth revealed in Yeshua are the impelling forces that uphold all righteousness and keep the word of Yahweh, the Torah, positioned, anchored within our hearts. These are complementary. They are not opposites. It is according to the grace of the Father Yahweh that Mashiach is even revealed in a person's heart. For more information, see the article 18, New Testament Misconceptions, number 12, Grace and Torah, in the appendix of the AENT. Right? And then finally, a wordplay exists in the bosom, which is Ba'aba, and Da'abuhi, of his father. Lots of poetry going on in Yochanan. Okay, he likes to group a lot of similar sounds together to form a tapestry of layered meaning and nuance. Okay? And how do we apply all these themes to our modern faith walk as believers? We must know where we came from to know where we're going. This time of year is all about renewal. It's all about repentance, progressing to a new and more righteous life, and deeper relationship with Abba Yahweh. We do this in the 7th month, which, like the 7th day or Shabbat, is a process of perfecting and resetting. Right? And for our appendix portion of the AENT, New Testament Misconceptions, number 1, and fulfilling the Torah, and number 2, destroying the Torah. I'm not going to read that because of all the extra material that we have, but that's what I recommend you look at. And this brings us to our study questions to be answered for next week. How does one word in Genesis 1:1 that cannot normally be translated become part of what we are told about Yeshua all the way in the book of Revelation? Question number 2. There is something very odd going on with the way the 6 creation days are referred to. What is it? Question number 3. What does the phrase greater light to rule the day and lesser light to rule the night prove about the original biblical calendar? Question number 4. How does the image of Noah in the ark, which obviously that's happening next week, but we are introduced to Noah here, hint at our future destiny? More than one answer is possible. And number 5, inherent in the curse that Abba Yahweh gives Adam is a clue about our future glory. I want to know what that clue is. There may be more than one correct answer here as well, but I have only one answer, one overriding answer in mind. I'd like to hear what you think. We can compare notes if you like. But that brings us at long last to our Torah thought for the week. Okay? And I call this documenting a failed hypothesis and its sequel. Let me explain what this is about. As this is the time of year that we begin reading Genesis all over again, it seemed a good idea for me to try to dispel some of the popular myths about it. No, don't worry. I'm not saying that Genesis itself is full of myths. Rather, I'm saying that many secular liberal scholars have resorted to telling lots of myths about Genesis in order to get their doctorates, their tenure, or any other mark in academia that proves that they have officially arrived. We need to face some very hard facts here. Most of the people whose job it is to be professional Bible experts, with their degrees and stuff like that, are themselves, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, hostile to the historicity and authenticity of the Bible. They range from the majority view in archaeology called biblical minimalism, and that's exactly what it sounds like. That's where the Bible is viewed as either completely inaccurate and that everyone from Adam to Solomon never existed at all in the minimalist viewpoint. And then other minimalists are textual critics that think they can prove our beloved Torah text is the product of the 7th or 6th centuries BCE, a fable, a myth told to people in exile. There are many such excesses in these fields, dozens in fact, that have dismayed me over the years. But this week, I'm only focusing on 2 of them. The so-called documentary hypothesis applied to the Torah, and its just as evil but younger brother, the Q hypothesis for the Gospels. Now, these alleged theories are dangerous, and I am using some fairly strong language here for a good reason. They're dangerous to biblical believers of any denomination in Judaism or Christianity, because what they do, and they make no bones about it, they admit it. They either deny the history of the Tanakh by reducing Moshe to a legend, or they deny the clear testimony of Messiah Yeshua himself, as if the Son of Yah, who is also the Word made flesh, never knew where that same word that he is came from. Yeshua and his apostles tell us that Moshe wrote all 5 Torah books. The liberal scholars say instead there was no Moshe, and the text has come down to us from 4 distinct sources separated by many centuries from the events it is supposed to portray, but they don't even believe those events actually happened. Then Yeshua and his apostles firmly believe in the entire genealogy in the Torah, from Adam to Abraham, from Isaac to Solomon. And yet the liberal scholars say they don't know. These apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Yeshua himself, they don't know what they're talking about. Almost all of these people, according to the minimalists, never existed at all. Yeshua and his apostles affirm the integrity and the historicity of the great prophets, including Isaiah and Daniel, to name just 2. But the liberal scholars think that at least 2 and as many as 4 people wrote the book of Isaiah, and that Daniel was too accurate in prophecies about a guy named Antiochus Epiphanes to have been written 3 centuries before those events happened. Because after all, everyone knows, they say, that prophecy is a fraud. It cannot happen. Miracles are frauds. They don't happen in their worldview. Never mind that even if you take the book of Daniel and put it at the minimalist latest date, which is somewhere around 160 BC, even that revised date will still have Daniel hitting the exact day of Messiah's death from at least 200 years out. So, no matter what they do, they're coming up against the hard testimony and facts of the superiority of the Word of Yah. If all this sounds a bit annoying, trust me, there's a lot more where they came from. And I've not even scratched the surface of even the really bad things that these so-called experts have been preaching over the last 200 years. Over and over again, they make assertions with conviction, but never retract themselves, or seldom at least, when the evidence for their ideas literally crumbles at their feet. I have many examples of that phenomenon too, but that's not my focus. I want to stay clear on my point here. So without further fanfare, let me progress to that, starting with the so-called documentary hypothesis. Now, what is this? This theory was developed by German scholars in the middle of the 19th century, at a time when biblical skepticism was nearly at an all-time high. That is to say, almost as bad as it is now. In a nutshell, the documentary hypothesis alleges that instead of the Torah being written by one man, Moshe, the solid position, again, that Messiah Yeshua holds, that we have is a highly edited text that was weaved together many centuries later by 4 distinct sources. Just like there's 4 Isaiahs, there are 4 authors, they say, of the text that we call Genesis through Deuteronomy. These 4 sources are as follows. The J source, so named because it uses the name of Yahweh, which in German is spelled with a J in its accounts. The E source, so named because it uses the divine title of Elohim in its accounts. These scholars say, without any proof on their side whatsoever, that the J source, the Yahweh stories, are derived from the kingdom of Judah, and the E source are derived from the kingdom of Israel. Again, where is the proof? Then there is the D source, which stands for Deuteronomy, indicating that the 5th book of Moshe came from a separate and very late editor. And finally, the P source is someone who's concerned with the priestly code, and that's what P stands for. Then, at some even later time, another guy who's never even named weaves all these sources together, allegedly resulting in the text that we now currently have. Here's the thing, though. If that's true, then it should always be the case that complete original Judah stories that only contain Yahweh and complete original Israel stories that only contain Elohim. It must be the case that the two shouldn't need one another. But I have solid proof that they do. We're going to use the story of Noah, and I've isolated 2 separate stories according to this hypothesis. One, according to J, where only Yahweh appears. The other, according to E, where only Elohim appears. Let's see how they do. Let's see how the documentary hypothesis holds up to scrutiny. And Yahweh said to Noah, this is doing J, of course, "You and your entire house come into the ark, for I have seen you as righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast you will take to yourself 7, and 7, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean 2, the male and his female, of the birds also of the heavens. 7 and 7, male and female, to keep the seed alive upon the face of all the earth. For in yet 7 days I will cause it to rain upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And every living thing that I have made I will destroy from off of the face of the ground. And Noah did according to all that J, Yahweh, commanded him. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In the selfsame day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife, and 3 wives of his sons with them into the ark. They and every beast after its kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth after its kind, and every bird after its kind, and every bird of every sort. And they went into into the ark, 2 and 2 of all flesh, wherein there is the breath of life. And the flood was 40 days, and this is starting in verse 7:17, by the way, a section where we're going to see that there's no trace of either Yahweh or Elohim. So I have to make a guess as to which account this belongs to. And I made that decision, by the way, based on the fact that those details are repeated in the other source. So bear this in mind as I read. And the flood was 40 days upon the earth, and the waters increased and bore up the ark, and it was lifted above the earth, and the waters prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth. And the ark went upon the face of the waters, and the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth. And all the high mountains that were under the whole of heaven were covered. Right? 15 cubits upwards did the waters prevail, and the mountains were covered, and all flesh died that moved upon the earth, both birds and cattle, and beasts, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the Spirit of life. And all that was on the dry land died, and every living thing was destroyed that was upon the face of the ground, both man and cattle, and creeping things, and birds of the heavens, and they were destroyed from the earth. And Noah only was left, and they that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed upon the earth for 150 days. Right? Now get a load of this. Noah built an altar to Yahweh, and took of every clean beast and every clean bird, and offered a burnt offering on the altar, and Yahweh smelled the sweet savor. My question is, when did Noah leave the ark? Where does it say that Noah left the ark? Where does it say, or is he building the altar inside the ark, which is kind of dangerous because he's setting a fire? Okay? And Yahweh smelled the sweet savor, and Yahweh said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for that the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, neither will I again strike at any more all that is living, as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. So again, where is Noah told by Yahweh, to get off the ark? When does Noah get off the ark? Oh, I forgot. Elohim, the other source, told Noah to get off the ark. Silly me. So you wrap up the J account. And Noah began to be a husbandman, and planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine and was intoxicated, and he was naked within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and his two brethren. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders, and went backward, and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his youngest son had done to him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall he be to his brethren. And he said, and this is the real problem, remember, we're dealing with two different accounts. In theory, one account just says Yahweh, the other account just says Elohim. So how do we explain this? Blessed be Yahweh, the Elohim of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. So who gets the credit for that line? J, Yahweh, or E, the Elohim of Shem? And it's only 2/3 of a blessing anyway, because you're going to see E for the rest of that blessing, because J here doesn't want to bless Japheth. Right? Why? I don't know. Right? And also, the J document doesn't seem to know when Noah died, how old he was. Nothing. Seems a pretty poor account. But for the E account, I mean, and now keep in mind, this is considered the most accurate theory for the composition of the Torah by liberal secular scholars, and we've already seen it's falling apart. And for the other account, for the E account, it's even worse. Here is the Noah story according to E. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man and perfect in his generations, because Noah walked with Elohim. And Noah fathered 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And the earth was corrupt before Elohim, and the earth was filled with violence, and Elohim saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. And Elohim said to Noah, The end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Rooms you will make in the ark, and you will pitch it within and without with pitch. And this is how you will make it. The length of the ark will be 300 cubits. Well, where is all that in J? J doesn't know this. E knows this. The length of the ark will be 300 cubits. Its breadth of it will be 50 cubits. The height of it, 30 cubits. A light you will make to the ark, and to a cubit you will finish it upward, and the door of the ark you will put into the side. With lower, second, and third stories you will make it. And behold, I do bring the flood of the waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven. Everything that is in the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will come into the ark, you and your sons, and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort you will bring to the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, of the birds of their kind. Apparently, E doesn't know that Noah also brought 7 animals of each kind as well. Okay? Of the birds after their kind, and the cattle of their kind, of every creeping thing of the ground of its kind, 2 of every sort shall come with you, to keep them alive. And take to yourself all the food that is eaten, and gather it to you, and it shall be for food for you and for them. Thus did Noah, according to all that, again, Elohim commanded him. So did he. And Noah was 600 years old. J doesn't know that. E knows that. Was 600 years old when the flood waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives with him, into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Of clean beasts, and of beasts that were not clean, and of birds, of everything that creeps upon the ground. There went in 2 and 2 to Noah into the ark, male and female, as Elohim, that's how we know it's an E document, commanded Noah. And it came to pass that after 7 days the waters of the flood were upon the earth. And in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up. Again, J doesn't have that information. And the windows of heaven were opened. Okay, so the windows of heaven are opened. But where is the flood? Just as the windows of heaven are open, and they that went in, male and female, all flesh, as Elohim had commanded him. But the flood itself is not mentioned. Not really. Remember that last phrase, the windows of heaven were opened. We are only told that above, and then right below, almost instantly, the windows of heaven were stopped. So what happens in between the 2 events? I guess the flood itself was not an important detail for the E document. Let's continue, where Elohim comes back into the story. And Elohim remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And Elohim made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters receded. Okay, so the windows of heaven opened, and now the waters have receded. What happened in between? The fountains also of the deep and the windows of the heaven were stopped. The rain from heaven was restrained. So it's over before it even begins. And the waters returned from off the earth continually, and after the end of 150 days, the waters decreased. Okay, that might be the closest thing to a reference of the flood. And the ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month upon the mountains of Ararat. Too bad the J source has no idea, does not mention where Noah landed. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. And in the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, were the tops of the mountains seen. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. And he sent forth a raven, and it went forth to and fro until the waters were dried off from the earth. And he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off of the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot. And she returned to him to the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. And he put forth his hand, and he took her, and brought her into him into the ark. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and again sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came into him at eventide, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off of the earth. And he stayed yet another 7 days, and sent forth the dove, and she did not return again to him any more. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the 1st month, the 1st day of the month, the waters were dried up from off of the face of the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the base of the ground was dried. And in the second month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, was the earth dry. Here's a key line here. And Elohim spoke to Noah, saying, go forth from the ark. Oh, here's the command. Okay. You and your wife and your sons wives with you. Bring forth with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, both birds and cattle, and every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. And Noah went forth, and his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, every bird, whatsoever moves upon the earth, after the families went forth from the ark. But apparently, Noah does nothing in response to this command, in the sense that he only builds the altar to Yahweh, not to Elohim. Another inconsistency. And Elohim blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, with all in which the ground teems, and all the fishes of the sea into your hand are they delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you, as the green herb have I given you all, but the flesh with the life which is of the blood you will not eat. And surely your blood, the blood of your lives, will I require at the hand of every beast that will require it. And at the hand of man, even at the hand of every man's brother, will I require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. And for in the image of Elohim he was made. And Elohim spoke to Noah and his sons with him, saying, and behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, every beast of the earth with you, of all that go out of the ark, and even every beast of the earth, and I will establish my covenant with you. Neither shall all flesh be cut off any more by the waters of the flood, neither shall there be any more flood to destroy the earth. And Elohim said, this is the token of the covenant which I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you. For perpetual generations I set my bow in the cloud, my rainbow, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. And it shall come to pass, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you, and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. And my rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it, that I may remember the everlasting covenant. The everlasting covenant between Elohim and every living creature of all flesh that is upon the earth. And Elohim said to Noah, this is the token of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is upon the earth. And the sons of Noah went forth from the ark, were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and Ham is the father of Canaan. These were the sons of Noah, and of these was the whole earth overspread. But here's, you get this blessing here. Elohim enlarged Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Right? So, in spite of the fact that Elohim blessed Noah and his sons, well, you know, I just think that this is not consistent at all. You have that extra data about how old Noah was when he died, and it just doesn't make sense. So, I will be moving on from this point. I think, though, it's pretty clear that neither the alleged J or E account can stand on its own. Just read the story like I just did. And as for Q, that other theory, the New Testament theory tells us that Mark supposedly wrote first, and then his account was independently adapted by Matthew and Luke in separate times and places. When these same scholars, though, took a closer look, they found out that there was a significant amount of material that was in both Matthew and Luke that wasn't in Mark. And they dubbed the material Q, from the German word Quelle, meaning source. However, I think Q really stands for questionable, because not a single shred of any Q document, any part of any Q document has ever been found anywhere. And I wouldn't hold my breath for waiting for that to change. And unlike the character from Star Trek The Next Generation that bears the same name, this Q has hardly any power at all. No magic can save this theory. And besides all this, these scholars have no clue about certain details that are only just in Matthew. Star of Bethlehem, the Magi come, or only just in Luke, shepherds at the Nativity, the widow's gift at the temple. So who is the mysterious author that did not draw from either Mark or Q? Maybe we should call him R for ripoff. And then there's John, who apparently stands alone with no relationship to Matthew, Mark, Luke, or Q, with tons of stuff all his own that no one in this theory accounts for. If Q was the source then for Matthew and Luke, who was the source for John? And if John is his own source, then why not have this be the case with Matthew, Mark, and Luke? And there are other things in this theory that are simply not explained, like all four Gospels give accounts of the feeding of the 5,000. You cannot link that to any common crucifixion, passion, resurrection day thing that you would expect the Gospels to have, right? Where did John get his information? John himself claims it was from other apostles who chime in at the end with the phrase, "This is the disciple that Yeshua loved and who wrote these things down," and then you get that little line, "We know his testimony is true," right? Well, there's no Q needed for that. Where is he? And twice in Matthew and once in Mark, the accusation is given without proof of Yeshua saying he would rebuild the temple in 3 days. But they don't give the actual event. John, who supposedly comes later, is an eyewitness to that event, right? In John chapter 2, the actual incident is recorded. But since Matthew and Mark wrote first, how did John have more details? And where is this Q guy with the explanation for such a thing when you need him? Again, it fails scrutiny. Does Q explain why one Lazarus was simply the subject of a parable, whereas another Lazarus is the subject of a resurrection miracle in John? Luke has the parable of Lazarus. John has the resurrection of Lazarus. Why wouldn't Luke mention the resurrection of Lazarus first, or that there was another Lazarus that was risen from the dead? And as hard as it is for me to admit it, many years back, I spent way too much time trying to track down this Q source. And I thought it might have been Peter, putting that conclusion in my first book, Signs of the Cross. Since then, thankfully, I learned my lesson. The Gospels are in the same order they have been in for at least 1,800 years for a reason. Because Matthew wrote first, then Mark, then Luke, and then John. What's more, it is John in verses 5:1 through 2 who has details about Jerusalem in the present tense. Now, there is in Jerusalem a gate, but not after 70 AD when the Romans destroyed the city. And yet most scholars say that John wrote decades after the city was destroyed. But he's saying now there is this, but there wasn't after 70 AD. So the scholars have not seen the truth. All four Gospels circulated before the temple was destroyed. Such a chronology is evident with statements in Luke 1:1 through 5, where he mentions eyewitness accounts. Those who are eyewitnesses to the word, he says in his intro, which would certainly include the Apostle Matthew and possibly Mark, if the very strong tradition, Eastern and Western, is true, that Mark received dictation from Peter. Whatever that case may be, I say we need to stop listening to these secular liberal critics and start listening to what the actual biblical writers themselves say about their own history. If not, we're doomed only to repeat a bad history, a bad scriptural interpretation. So I'm Andrew Gabriel Roth, and that's your Torah thought for the week. Next week, we will be exploring Noach, Genesis 6:9 through 11:32. Our Haftorah portion will be Isaiah 54:1 through 55:5, and our renewed covenant reading will be from Matthew 24:36 through 44. Okay? And Torah 101 will return also with the Noach portion next week. Stay tuned. Have a great weekend, and thanks very much for listening. I'll talk to you later. Take care. Shalom.